All right, well, let me see if I can be loud. Welcome, everyone. Is my voice projecting? Enough? Okay, fabulous. Thank you, thank you. So first of all, thank you so much, each of you, for coming. This very special event tonight is being co-sponsored by a variety of organizations that are Vermont-based. The first of those is the Grafton Nature Museum, or the Nature Museum in Grafton. And I'd like to have the members of that board of directors at least raise your hand or stand up. We've got quite a few. Thank you. And of course, the board can't do much of anything without its fine staff. And so please raise your hand. What, you're on that? Oh, I am on that. That would be cool to say. Thank you. So our executive director, Nick Catherine. Sam McGonigal there, and other staff. So when we knew through the Nature Museum that we had an opportunity perhaps to bring Robert Michael Pyle to Vermont, we reached out to a couple of other organizations. One of those is relatively new, but already strong and important, and that's the Vermont Biodiversity Alliance. Is there anyone here from the Alliance tonight? That was the mandate. All right, great. Another is the Bonneville Environmental Education Center. Anybody here from that? Oh, outstanding. Yeah. Certainly last but not least is the Living Earth Action Group that has a home in part for us to gather right here in the Congregational Church in Westminster West that opens its doors to community groups often, and the Living Earth Action Group is able to come here. And we've been meeting every Friday since 2017 after a certain election occurred with our focus on the living earth and taking care of the planet that's home to us all. So with that, thank you. So a short story, the board of the Nature Museum was meeting, and it's a wonderful place. Please come to the Fairy House Festival if you've never done that before. Bring children, families, all of that. That will be what, September 28th, 29th this year? Okay. And the church fair.
That was to the slide in the audience. We can't hear you.
Thank you. All right, I'm trying to turn. Stand up here. All right, well, I'm also trying to project, but thank you for your help with that. Okay, am I all right still? I'm doing all right. Yeah, let me see you here. Great. So we were talking about trying to enhance some habitat on the 3.5 acres that are out there at the Nature Museum in Grafton. And the name the Xerxes Society came up. And I said, Xerxes, that's a nonprofit that's focused on enhancing habitats, taking care of invertebrates to take care of wildlife and species all over, and the habitat itself. And I said, well, I know this guy who actually founded the Xerxes Society when he was in his 20s. Wouldn't it be fun if we could invite him out and see a small part of that legacy? And so that led to an invitation to Robert Michael Pyle to come and be with us tonight. But a little more about Bob. First of all, fabulous human being, that goes without saying, but he's a scientist and he's a scholar, and he got his PhD from Yale in biology, but he's also a literary person. He's written 28 books, the most recent of which has just come out, The Last Man in Philippi, a book of poetry. So he writes natural history. He also writes fiction, his first novel, Magdalena Mountain. So I'm only showing you a few of the 28. One of them that's incredibly important to many of us in education is called The Thunder Tree, and that's where he started in 75. You coined the phrase extinction of experience to help us humans try to figure out what it means when we lose a connection to a place or when species disappear. So The Thunder Tree, outstanding book, again, one of many. And this is all from my first one. So, the Village Square Booksellers in Bellows Falls has ordered that we're going to put in probably pretty easily available anyway. And one more of the 28. I ordered this long before I knew Bob even wrote it, but it's the National Audubon Guide to Butterflies. So,
Darn it, it killed me. Last book I did without a computer. That was a guy with poison poisoning.
so of the many honors and awards, I may or may not mention his Guggenheim Fellowship. He's an honorary life member of the American and the Royal Etymological Societies, so in the UK and here in the United States. He received the John Burroughs Medal for his nature writing after his book, Measure the Green. And all of this is fun. One of his books, where Bigfoot walks, was actually turned into a feature film. And you can even see it, it's pretty easily streamed. It's based as a autobiographical hymn, and it was based on real life, but only a smidgen, only a part of his life.
The film's called The Dark Divide.
Thank you, I was getting there. And an actor by the name of David Cross plays him. A woman by the name of Deborah Messing, you may have also heard him, played his wife, Tia, who he was married to for a long time before her passing. And it's just a delightful film, but those of us, including Ken Finch sitting over here, who've known Bob for a long time, know that the way David Cross plays him is not authentic. They make him look like he didn't know what he was doing in the woods. Here's a man, he's been out there identifying species and doing all of this research right in the end of the film. The film is otherwise absolutely great, and it just arcs as far as all of that goes. All of this is to say we are so thrilled to have him here. No more to say now. Welcome, Robert Michael Pyle.
Thank you very much. I'm so happy to be here. I love this state. I live in Washington State, in rural area, very rural. 4,000 people in my county. 4,000 in my county, no traffic lights. Near the mouth of the Columbia River. And it's pretty too, but it's pretty in a different way, not a Vermont way. Kind of a shaggy Western Washington logged early and logged often way. Well, you were logged even earlier and logged often too. But this is the most beautiful state, perhaps, in my opinion. And I have spoken and taught and done field work in every single state. And I do think Vermont is demonstrably, maybe by an order of magnitude, the most completely beautiful state. And you keep it this way, and I honor you for doing that. I've been lucky to teach and lecture and lead workshops and so on. There are lots of places in Vermont, a lot of colleges and a bunch of nature centers and so on. But one of the most delightful places I've been in the state so far was the Grafton Nature Museum yesterday. And I just love it, and you're all going to love it too if you haven't been there yet. Thank you for having me, and all of you. I want to thank all the said organizations that Cheryl mentioned, especially the museum. And I want to thank the people who have hosted me here. Ken and Sharon, where are you? There you are. And everybody else who's hosting me, including the Village Square booksellers tomorrow night in Bellows Falls. I'll be giving a reading, mostly poetry, from several different books, a couple of song pieces, and that is
6:30.
6:30? So please come if you can. Not all my books will be there, but half a dozen titles or so. And I want to thank you especially Cheryl, this dear woman, an old friend of mine. She's not old, but our friendship goes back a ways. And funnily enough, we always seem to get together on extremely portentous political times. For example, I attended a remarkable party in her hotel room at a Children in Nature concert. I mean to say, of course, conference. But we were all singing. It was Obama's first election. That was quite a party. And here we are again. Who knows what's going to happen next time? The inauguration of the Queen of the World, who will no doubt be from Vermont, and live in one of the fairy houses at the beaches. And they do this fairy house festival. And do you know about it? You gotta go to the museum. They got several of them on display. They are so cool. And I want to come back here for the fairy house festival, and then stay a couple of weeks for the colors. And then maybe a couple years after that. Go on. So thank you for having me back to Vermont. I think arguably my most delightful trip here yet, and we're only halfway through. I'm going to start with a poem because every occasion should start with a poem if possible. It's from my book Chinook and Chanterelle, which I wrote for my late wife Tia, who was the best chanterelle hunter ever. We met in a mushroom class in 1967, and throughout her life she was the best. I would not want to be a chanterelle in the same county as her. The poem I'm going to share with you is called Pollination. Night blooming Sirius opens white flowers to tippling bat, like petticoats parted for a ravenous lover. Fringed prairie orchid takes the tongue of hawk moth, gives back nectar, so that in constant impassioned hawk moth carries fringed prairie sperms to the next tasseled bloom. Log orchids entrust their pollen to mosquitoes. That's one reason, at least, for their existence. White-winged doves drink the nectar of sapphoros, ensuring purple fruits to come. Hummingbirds, of course, pollinate 1,000 plants. Aqualegia, delphinium, fuchsia, and ribes, just for starters. But it's the bees who move the bulk of those golden gardens. Bees and wasps and flies and bee flies and hoverflies and butterflies and the many moths who service the night bloom. Pollination, how flowers make love through their happy go-betweens, the insects, birds, and bats. How plants make it through the night. And I'm going to follow with a joke I just heard in the elevator. Where's Tom? Did you want to tell it?
I think half of them have heard it already. So, a person has a new vinyl record. They just got it. They're so excited about this thing. It's a recording of a wasp. So they're very anxious to show it to their friends. So it goes over to the friend's house, puts it on the turntable. They start playing it. The friend says, I don't know how to say it. To me, it doesn't really sound like a wasp. And they stop it and say, oh, sorry, man. That's the B side.
Well, as I said, thank you so much for coming tonight and have a good evening. I know you all want me to get back. I got it here so you can get back to CNN. But I'll forge ahead anyway, although it's kind of hard to go up from there, Tom. Now, the reason I'm hobbling around up here like Walter Brennan and the Real McCoys, you know? Dang, haven't. Remember that? And I'm carrying a big stick. Because I got a busted butt and I'm going to get fixed in the fall. Anybody ever done that? Yes, I'm quite sure. So I'm looking forward to that. Another one in the winter. So I'm getting what I call my total butt transplant. I said that the other day, and somebody said, well, yeah, you do both of them. There's no point going about this thing half-assed. See if we can go down from there. Now, we need to make this much darker than this. All lights off, please. And if there's any windows that aren't quite closed, then can close more, especially that one. I'm sorry, Nick. I just got to go. Because we use half the color if we don't have it. This is a very color-rich presentation. That's pretty rough. That's good. That helps a lot, doesn't it? We've already come up with a couple of shades of color.
Is the top.
Now, I'm worried about you, though. I'm doing a total eclipse of the screen for you, right? Maybe I can get a little further over.
No, you can't. No, you're good.
I'm only walking.
Can't go too far.
Yes.
Can you see better now? Okay, you can't, Dan, but you can move. Yeah. Holland, where to start? Start with the Vienna crocus, so it can be pretty. So I heard before. We had an overkill. Yeah, I fully converted it, full some mass. Straight up the page down.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe that's it, because the thing was on. There we go. Yeah, it was. It was the lock off. There it is. Okay, where am I going to go, right? Coming off. Pollen, when you think about it, are these tiny grains, and we know this, and for some of us, they make us sneeze. I was miserable during a lot of my butterfly hunting boyhood because I had that hay fever. And it is the different shapes that interact, of course, and cause the histamines to go up on you. But did you know how many different shapes and patterns and colors and designs there are of the pollen? There are, this is just a tiny, tiny array of stuff. It gives you a little bit of a hint. There are all kinds of shapes and things, and they're differently patterned for selected reasons. In many cases, they particularly fit a docking pattern in the side of the female plant. And we also know, and this is to establish the fact, that there is a very, very long and extraordinarily powerful coevolution between plants and insects, and in particular, in this case, between pollinating insects, which are frequently pollen-eating insects, and also nectar-eating insects, and the plants. And this is why I say that the pollinating organisms are the go-betweens between the lovers in the plant world. And very often the pollinators are modified physically in such a way that they can carry the pollen efficiently, such as the pollen baskets of bees, which I'm sure you've all seen. Well, we've seen so far a honeybee and a small bumblebee. There are many, many other kinds of pollinators, such as this bee fly on, what, a scilla of some kind maybe? And this one is just to say that the anatomy of the pollinators is commonly modified for the task, just as the recipient structures on the plants are modified. Modification is the physical manifestation of evolution. And this is why I say that they're co-evolved, because both the plants and the insects and other pollinators are modified for the task, which means there's been selective pressure on their descent to get better at doing it and to make their tools better and more refined. Now, there are specialists and generalists. This bee flies, something of a specialist because it's got the long proboscis that's stiff, that can go into a deep column. Others are quite general. Honeybees are extremely generalist pollinators, and they can pollinate a great many plants. None of them as efficiently as some of the specialists, but they do a lot of different kinds. Now, when we think about pollination, especially in recent times, we think about a couple of billboard animals that get a whole lot of press. And what's gotten more press in recent years than monarchs? Well, largely because of their the petition by the Xerces Society and others, which, by the way, I founded it in my 20s, about 10, 15 years ago. 53 years old now, with almost 100 employees in 28 states, including 6 in New England, was I told yesterday by Julian? So Xerces is all over the place now, but they petitioned Fish and Wildlife to list the monarch. This is still in question. It was ruled that it deserves it, but not yet, which is a common ruling because it doesn't cost anything to say that. But in the meantime, a great deal of money gets spent by different agencies, nature centers and so on, and a vast amount of energy, money, and effort has been put out on behalf of monarchs. and they're necessary milkweeds because of that petition for listing. So even if they're never listed, and there are some arguments against it, it will have done a lot of good for monarchs. But we hear a great deal about it, and that's because of this remarkable insect and its very, very special traits. We know, of course, about the coevolution of monarchs and milkweed. They're the only plants that monarch larvae can subsist on. The reverse is not true. Milkweed would get along without monarchs, and not as well. And so here we have the love affair between the two, and here we have, and that's your milkweed. You have several species, but the most common is the big-leafed common milkweed. In the West, our counterpart is the showy milkweed. But there are other species. This is our western, barely even touched it. Sensitive. That's the showy milkweed in the West. Good nectar plant for lots of other things. So a lot of people are planting milkweed for monarchs, even though they might not live in monarch territory. A lot of people in western Washington and Oregon and BC, which are some of the only parts of the country that just plain don't have monarchs. Because milkweeds are not native west of the Cascades until you get down to about Salem and Eugene and on down. So we are a monarch void, except for off-range migrants that, slip the unbalanced, and that happens. But they might find it, so you might get a monarch. But it doesn't matter, because if you find milkweeds, it doesn't hurt anything. And they're wonderful nectar plants for a great many other insects as well. But the other part of that coevolution, of course, is the caterpillar. Remember that every insect is at least two different kinds of animals in its life cycle. Some are radical metamorphosers, and some are they call them holometabolists or hemimetabolists. And the hemimetabolists molt. They're successive approximators. They become more and more like the adult as you go along, from the nymph to the adult, like grasshoppers, dragonflies, and so on. But then the holometabolists are radically metamorphosing insects, like the butterflies and moths, the flies, the beetles, and the Hymenoptera, A side and B side. You get the 4 stages, the 4 discrete stages, the egg or ovum, the caterpillar or larva, or larvae for plural, the pupa or pupae, which is the chrysalis stage, often called cocoon, but butterflies don't make cocoons on the whole. Cocoons are the silken bag that many moths weave around their chrysalis, or pupa. And then the adult, or imago. And this is the caterpillar stage, of course, of the monarch. Some caterpillars are camouflaged to keep from being eaten. This is the opposite strategy. Obviously, if it's camo, it's really crappy camo. And it's even got those fancy bits on the end, which are not functional. They're not antennae. These tubercles, as far as we know, don't have any sensory function. I might be wrong about that. But I think I call them bogus doodads. Technical term. And I think they're just there to enhance the conspicuousness of the animal. They would want to be seen. Pardon my occasional anthropomorphism. It is the function of its dramatic coloration and pattern to be seen by predators who have already had a bite of them. Some of you will remember the most famous picture in American biology, which was the cover picture of the May 1969 Scientific American. Anybody call that up right off the bat? I'm sure you might remember it. It's the picture of the barfing blue jay, Lincoln Brower, great New Englander, when he was at Amherst for a very long time doing this research, at Yale, at Oxford, and then at Amherst for a long time, then at Florida. And then he devoted the rest of his career until his death to saving the monarchs. But he's the one with his wife, Jane Van Zanterauer, who worked out that mimicry and teaching of distastefulness to the potential predator really does work. Darwin thought so, Bates thought so, Wallace thought so, Beebe thought so. The Browers showed that it really happens in the laboratory and in the wild. So you take your naive blue jay, you got your 7-picture panel on page. Even I don't go to the page. Some page in that issue, you have your 9-picture panel, and it's going through the different stages of a blue jay having just consumed a monarch, adult. Because the adults also are, as you know, really bad at camel on birds. So it's a naive blue jay, which means to a behavioral psychologist, it's just hasn't been tested before. Doesn't know from monarchs. And it's hungry, not starved, but ordinarily hungry. It's feeding time. And they give it a monarch and it eats it. And then the pictures start going through and you get this kind of, you know how the blue jays can look kind of quizzical sometimes? And then they can look downright, not too sure about this. And it goes on in that mode until you finally get to picture number 7, and it's the barfing blue jay. I mean, tossing its entire cookies all over. And then, following that, it's the retching blue jay, and then the educated blue jay with his cap and gown and all. Bust is folded back. And that's that. And so it works. Well, I've told Lincoln many times, I said, you know, Lincoln, we were down in the monarchs. I've worked in monarch conservation for over 50 years and I've been to the monarchs in Mexico a lot. And this is soon after they were discerned by science. I won't say discovered because the Tarascan Indians knew about it, the local mestizo population in the Indians. They all knew monarch, but scientists didn't know monarchs, including Mexican scientists, until 1975, one of the most recent big butterfly discoveries saw atomic. And then Lincoln came on and did all this work, and I said, Lincoln, no matter how famous you ever get, after the Nobel, everything, nobody's really going to remember you for anything except the barfing blue jay. There's a great, amazing trait about monarchs, of course, is their migration, which is the most dramatic of insect migrations, of which there are many different kinds and gradients, you know. There are, like so many things, there are very few bilaterals. There are very few dualisms in nature, most things are gradients. And there are some, like you build a dam or you don't build a dam. There's not some how do you build a dam. But many things are gradients, and one of them is distastefulness. So not all milkweeds are equally distasteful. There's a gradient of it's called the spectrum of palatability. Now that didn't Lincoln discovery. So the monarchs from some areas are less distasteful than those from others. That's why a lot of mixing is important in the migration. And then when they get down there, they gather. And this is a giant queue of birds, not to eat them. Doesn't work entirely because, of course, you've got a lot of food and energy and fat and protein there. Someone's going to figure it out. And so two species, well, two groups of birds, a black-headed grosbeak, one much like our own, and then a whole guild of orioles, queen bullocks, but several other orioles, all feed specifically on the monarchs when they're there. And the grosbeaks did gross them down. And if they buffer it with other foods, they make it. They don't in the lab, they have only monarchs, they don't. But the orioles take their scimitar bills and excise the good fats and muscles from the cardinalide-bearing poisonous tissues, powerful heart poisons. So this is one reason they cluster, and there are others. But they're tropical butterflies, can't winter here in the north, so they save their gene pool in Mexico at high altitude, not down in the tropics, but they stay torpid through the winter, and then they, the same butterfly that left here gets all the way to Mexico, all the way to Michoacan, and then they start back again, and then they lay eggs on the way, and the ones that may still make it here this summer, it was a poor monarch winter in Mexico, and but conditions have been good, and it's predicted that the late summer influx and bloom will probably be good. So don't despair yet. I know your milkweeds are getting old, but we might still get monarchs this way. Anyway, the ones that make it back here are 2 or 3 generations removed from the ones that migrated, maybe 4. So several generations up, only 1 down. So that's the other fabulous thing about monarch migration. It depends on what they feed on, though, because they can't get to Mexico unless they build up their fat reserves dramatically to get through the winter. And they do that by nectaring on flowers. In this case, a monarch in eastern Washington nectaring on wild sunflower. I conducted an experiment and a field trip and a literary adventure also in 1998 called Chasing Monarchs. It became a book, Chasing Monarchs. I followed migration all the way down, talked about what their natural history was, and actually discovered something kind of profound, that the eastern monarchs were all thought to go to Mexico, the western ones all to California, the Rocky Mountains is a Berlin Wall between them. I didn't believe that, growing up on the cusp of the Rockies and seeing them going in both directions. So I followed them. Didn't do any great science, but I found out what they really did, and I discovered that some western monarchs also go to Mexico. And now there's been a lot more work on that, and there's a lot of admixture in Arizona, and which of course makes sense. That you all know everything's connected, and that makes a much more interesting system of monarchs. We have to conserve them in both places altogether. On the way, the nectar, and they are moderately important pollinators, but they're not the whole show. Nor is the whole show honeybees. And those are the two things that people are led to believe that we got to say, monarchs and bees. And when people think bees, they think honeybees. And yes, they're important pollinators. That's why they import many thousands of them to Maine for the blueberries every year, and to California for the almonds. Because your honeybees or mason bees, maybe one or two other species. But don't think for a minute that the non-native honeybees, as wonderful as they are, I love honey, are the whole show. In fact, sometimes they're deleterious to the native pollinators, not all. In fact, there's a wide array of pollinators that you simply have to go out there and open your eyes and you'll see. So let's look at one patch of Gaillardia, also known as Indian blanket flower in the West. Common garden flower, good nectar plant. Here we are with a longhorn bee. Same patch, couple flowers over, is a leafcutter bee. You can even see a little oval out of one of the petals. It had a little salad before the main course. Ate a salad before it's dessert. Isn't that good? Good bee. Eat your veg before your sweets. And then, a little further down the patch, we got us a bumblebee. Or a bumblebee mimic. Do you know for sure? They can be awfully hard to tell. Some of the flies are extraordinarily bumblebee-like. They even buzz in their hand. And you know they can't sting. And it's still almost impossible to hold them in your hand. This big thing looks like that. It's atavistic, of course, in our own evolution. This one is actually the eyes and then the thorax. And then we go into a different species of Gaillardia in Colorado, and we find a whole different order, away from the Hymenoptera, a moth. This is a moth called the Nuttall's flower moth, or the wildfire flower moth, because this Gaillardia and this moth proliferate where it's burned in Colorado. Not the giant burns of today, but the regular burns that were more common before. Promote a whole degree of specialists for post-fire conditions. But one of them is these beautiful Gaillardias, and then this moth that co-evolved into flower to the extent that when it perches on it, its yellow, furry scaled, poodle head-looking thorax is colored similar to the yellow of the gray flowers, and its burgundy-colored wings, which are almost the same color as the disc flowers, match them. And it really does perch on the flower that way. Astonishing. But in the meantime, it's a one-stop shopping because its caterpillars feed solely on the vegetation of this plant. And its adults get nectar on other things. Usually the adults are not nearly as picky as the larvae, but it nectars on it. So it's a really marvelous coevolution there. Now let's go through some seasons here. And we often the very first nectar plant that pops in a place will be the pussy willows. How early do you get them in Vermont? I know you can get the skunk cabbages in, gosh, in February, because I see them that way in Wilson. But do you get pussy willows as early as late February, early March? Not till April. Depends on the year. It's probably mostly April. Well, anyway, that's when the pussy willows pop. And pussy willows are cool because they play both ends against the middle. They're both lint pollinated, like a lot of other plants in a group of trees that don't have perfect flowers, petals and things, birches, hazels, and they're largely wind pollinated. But willows have not only the wind pollination capacity, but they also have nectaries, which is the word for nectar producing plants. And so they play both ends against the net. And so nectar feeders, like the morning cloak butterfly, having overwintered as an adult, and this is what your kids saw at their house early this spring. Cheryl was morning cloak having overwintered. They looked like they're white and black, but they're really this rich brown mahogany with blue spots and then a yellow margin. I call it French vanilla, blueberries, and dark chocolate. And they're fresh, and they will be now in midsummer on. You'll see bright fresh morning cloaks. But they overwinter as adults, as do the commas and the tortoiseshells. And so they come out in the spring pretty catty and faded. And they're looking for nectar because they're hungry by then. They still got to lay eggs. And so pussy willows are commonly where they go for. Pussy willows can be very important for a lot of early insects. This picture-wing fly, for example, I once taught a butterfly workshop supposedly for the National Wildlife Federation in Banff at the Chateau Lake Louise. Anybody ever been to the Chateau Lake Louise? Yeah. Beautiful place in the aquamarine lake. How could the National Wildlife Association afford to have a nature workshop at the Chateau Lake Louise? Because it was June. And there's this much snow on all of it. And I was supposed to be teaching a butterfly. Fortunately, I brought some live swallowtails on ice from Washington, where there are all their lilacs in a cemetery on my way up there. That was handy. But mostly I taught about early spring flies on the pussy willows. And here's a bumblebee still coming onto the pussy willows. I keep harping on pussy willows just because of the fact that it's not always the bright, showy pollinators with a bunch of petals, color, which are the good nectarines. I said pollinators and then pollen sources. So when we do a bioblitz and look for all the organisms, of course, it's going to be very seasonally dependent. And species arrays will differ during the year. Early on in the March and the willow beds. Then we move into the seasons with a wider array of flowers coming, such as this. I think it's an anemone. Would anybody gainsay me on that? Tell me if I misname something, please correct me. It might be an anemone, northeastern one. There's the mosquito from my poem. They pollinate a lot of flowers, and a good many bog orchids, some in the genus Orchis, are pollinated exclusively by certain mosquitoes. I was on a field trip up in the Okanagan forest of Washington last year, back in the bog, and there's a Japanese-American student from the University of Washington there, who it turned out had studied, he'd had a chance to study mosquitoes in Japan. And now he was studying mosquitoes in bog orchids for his PhD. So it's a real thing, and they're important. So next time, also, the next time you want to punch somebody when you see them with a butterfly net, remember yourself doing that. I say that because butterfly nets are not weapons of mass destruction, and they're not tools that have ever done very many butterflies in the whole world much damage. They're methods of entomological research. We are the worst predators on the earth, butterfly predators. They're some of the most elusive prey. And if it weren't for the people with butterfly nets, who have discovered what's out there, like the fabulous Vermont butterfly survey that took place, 15 years ago or so? It was the best state butterfly survey that had ever been done in the country. Kent McFarland and Brian Pfeiffer and others, and it was superb, but it requires nets sometimes. Now we do mostly iNaturalist and binoculars and cameras, but we can't always get proper identification of them. So when you see someone with an insect, you pat them on the back, you punch them out. Then when you're rolling. And the other thing is, there's no better tool in the world. Cheryl and I have been involved a lot with a cat named Richard Louvre wrote The Last Child in the Woods, Saving Our Children from Nature Deficit Disorder. Never been a better tool against nature deficit disorder in children than an insect net. Give a kid a camera or binoculars, yeah, they're not going to down after a while. Give her a net and she's gone. So just keep that in mind. So that's my PSA. And then we're going to a whole range of insects. Horseflies, not the most welcome things around. They take their pound of flesh if you give them a chance, but oh, they have beautiful flies. And important pollinators. Here's one on a cactus, and I think that it's probably more of a pollen feeder than a nectar feeder. Some pollinators do both, some do only nectar, some do only pollen. Would you put that one in your hand? Ain't no bumblebee, it's got a wasp waist, so we got 2 wings, not 4. It's a diptera, it's a fly. But I still wouldn't put that in my hand because it's a robber fly. Great predators. Look, it's got another insect in its mandibles. I'm not sure what that insect. It could be a firefly, actually. Looks like it could be a firefly. And those mandibles are big. And I would not put one in my hand. But there's a robber fly. It's a predator, but they still visit flowers. And here we have a hoverfly, who are also known as flower flies. And you see them all the time hovering in front of your face. They look like little bees. So many of their insects are bee mimics. For good reason. It's one of the most common forms of mimicry in nature. But this one is nectarine lawn. And it's not nectarine. Look how deep the corolla is there. And this hoverfly has no means of getting down into that corolla. Doesn't have a long build up there, like the longhorn bee I showed you, or like the weaver. No, it's just eating pollen right off of the anther. But then the next one it goes to, it's likely to transfer the pollen to this style of the female, which is likely poking up right in the middle. I don't know what kind of bee this is. It's on another kind of current, right? Says the rest of us. And this one might be able to go actually into the corolla, because bees do have a stiff pointed proboscis, and they're not too long. I don't know. I just between pollen. But they're everywhere. They're poking up everywhere, and they're cute. So when you see, oh, you know what down there? Oh, my close eyes. Splitting right. Good. We see a honeybee coated in pollen. It's pretty clear what's happening, and the message is not subtle. But it's not just insects. Or it's not just Hymenoptera, obviously. It's not just a bee sting. It is so lots of beetles. Just scarab of some sort, I think. Hard to see what it is. Scarab, it's on a California poppy bed. And it's been crawling around down there in the middle, getting pollen all over it. So it's, inevitable that it will take pollen to another planet. Of course, another way. But maybe my favorite pollinator animal of all time, and I assume is this one. Oops, wrong name. This one. The pollinating toad. I think it's a Texas red-spotted toad. I guess that's. I don't know what kind of flower that is. I think it's a cactus, maybe. That's too cute to be legal. All the cute cups. I can't know this. Let's not looking at it. And then, this one is not so uncommon. I'm not sure toads, are a really big part of any flower's pollination regime. Could be wrong. But then, another group of animals, which is a very big part, a lot of plants meeting their needs is batsies. Batsies. That is pollen plus bat. How much of the weight of that do you think is bat, and how much is pollen? I just want to eat it, you know? Or kiss it or nestle it. Pet it, I want to pet it. That's a really important pollination. I mean, as in my poem, the opening lines, they not only pollinate the night blooming cereus and the other desert plants, many of them. Remember the line that said, service the night blooming plants. That's what they do, the bats and the moths service the night plants.
Did you take this photograph? Sorry, I sent you.
I beg your pardon?
Did you take this photograph?
Oh, yes, I took them. No. I discovered this thing called the interweb. I took some of these pictures. My late wife Tia took some of the best ones. I didn't take very many of mine. Oh, I acknowledge the many photographers on the interweb. You know, if they're copyrighted and so on, I try to stay away from them. We can't acknowledge everyone, and many of them are not credited who they are anyway. So I consider it fair game, especially with PowerPoint, especially since Zoom has entered our lives in such a wonderful way. So thank you to all photographers, but thanks for asking. Here's how they do it. Walk the tongue. What bird here in this town do you think has the longest tongue? Yeah, I should remember who I'm talking to. Hummingbirds are good, but woodpeckers have a really, really long tongue. And a lot of people don't know that. But bats do too, at least the flower-feeding bats do. Look at going all the way down in there to the flower tube. Beautiful bat. Little puppy bat. I want to get on that permission. And then there are the butterflies and moths, such as the monarch nectar on its migration on the rabbit brush. And there are certain plants that really enable the migration to happen. In the West, they are largely milkweed, rabbit brush, goldenrod, sunflower, and then you get in, when you get farther south, it's many more kinds. The desert willow, which is not a willow, is really important. So in the east, there's of course a greater array of species of wildflowers than in most of the west, and but a similar array, asters, a lot of composites. But monarchs are very much generalist nectar birds. They'll nectar in a lot of different kinds of things. They do have some favorites. Also, there's research showing that butterflies will often favor a plant that was good to them soon after they emerge from the pupa. So they learn. They're big learners. I'll show you an example in a minute. But when I'm hungry, they'll nectar on many different kinds of things. It's only the sex of the monarch. We'll see how good you are. Yeah, but how come tall? Yeah, the hoosie patch. Call that a hoosie patch, like the what was doodads. The scientific term for the patch in the hind wing there on the vein is a hoosie patch. It's actually called the androconial patch in the sex pattern. Its male pheromones are stored in that, produced in the abdomen, and then it's got little hair pencils that are called reversible brushes on the end of the abdomen that it bends up and wipes onto the pad, which takes the pheromones like an ink pad from the and the females do not have that. But they pay attention to it. But it's a generalist. Remember again, make the point again, that butterflies and moths are two different kinds of animals in their life. They're crawling, worm-like, well, first an egg and later a pupa, but those are both relatively inactive except for biochemically. But mechanically speaking, the working parts are the caterpillar, the second stage, which is a crawling, worm-like creature that feeds, in almost all cases, on green vegetation. There are exceptions. There's the harvester butterfly back here, whose caterpillars feed on woolly aphids. And there's some other carnivorous. There's a carnivorous inchworm moth in Hawaii, which is also aquatic. So you have these aquatic moth caterpillars feeding on other aquatic invertebrates. So there's some exceptions. But most of them are worm-like creatures feeding on green vegetation. And then, they metamorphose. So you got your caterpillar, hairy, wormy thing on a penstemon in a Washington State Cascade Mountain Canyon, which will then shed its skin the final time, the fourth, fifth, sixth, or seventh time, depending on the type. And out comes this time not a bigger caterpillar, but the pupa or chrysalis. No cocoon, no silk bag. Cremaster is the hook and eye. I'm pointing at the screen as it comes. Dullard. So, see, when David Cross portrays me in the movie as a doofus in the woods, and the reason they do that, you can't have a movie that is, about a trip in the West if the person starts out smart, right? You have to be dumb at the beginning so you can grow and learn. That's why they do that. Not the doofus in the woods, he portrays me. It's a lot of fun, and he's really good. But you see, he's actually counteract, because I really can be a doofus. Looking at the screen. The butt up in the top is a little cremaster. It's like a hook and eye with silk and little hooks, crochet hooks. They lay down some silk and then put the crochet hooks in it, hang, shed their skin the last time, and out comes the exoskeleton around the chrysalis, which breaks down very quickly and already happened in the caterpillar, into a kind of an indiscriminate nebulous mass or soup or mush with no recognizable organs. But microscopically, there's some pads of cells in there called imaginable discs, because the atolls going to be a model that reconstitute it. It's like a piece of software that programs what's going to happen in the endocrine sense, and it brings the chemicals in the protoplasm back together to form the tissues and organs of the atom inside it. The ancients thought, of course, that it was molded by the pupa. In fact, you can see the wing, the antenna, the eyes, and the segments of the body on the outside. So, sure, it looks like a mold, but it doesn't do that. They're there, they receive it as it comes. And then jeweled, bejeweled, jewel box comes the other, the Chalcedony genix. But the common trait of many lepidoptera, besides the scales and the wings, that's what it means. Lepi, or lepis is scale, or shingle in Greek. Ptera, T-E-R, P-T-E-R is wing. So the Lepidoptera are the scaled winged insects. So the Diptera, too, are the flies, two wings. Hymenoptera, the membrane wing, are the bees and wasps. I'm going to say signs A and B in monarch. But the Lepidoptera have in common a long proboscis, most of them, that is not like the one of the bee fly or the bees that are rigid. I don't have a picture of it coiled up, but you know what that looks like. Well, you see them in a different slide. Coils up like a watch spring. I say that, and people say, don't use that term anymore with kids. They have no idea what a watch spring is. And then they can uncoil it with a very thin layer of muscles in the tongue or proboscis. And it's a double tube, like two drinking straws that are sutured together in metal, just like, it's biomimicry, they call it in technology. It's just like Ziploc bags. They might have got that idea from these. And they focus quite clearly with this cabbage white and composite in England is poking it down into the corolla to get the nectar. But they don't all do that. For example, certain Lepidoptera don't even have working mouthparts. They're sort of vestigial stuffs. They have lost their adult mouthparts and digestive organs, and they put all of their marbles into reproduction, lots and lots of eggs, maybe 1,000 or 1,500 eggs instead of having room for guts, room for this tummy, such as a lure. How many of you have seen a live lure? Oh, I'm so glad. It's one of the loveliest things in all the world, is it not? This pair was photographed by Tia in Missouri. Mating, and they won't do that. The giant silkworm moths, Cyclopes, Prometheus, Polyphemus, Wood, and the rest of it, live usually only about between 1 and 3 weeks, averaging probably 2. And that's pretty long. I mean, a lot of butterflies don't live any longer than that either, and they do feed. But these are big, And they put on a lot of fat in the caterpillar stage, eating all that hickory and oak and so on. And so they do it for a while. So that heliotrope, leading forewing, leading edge, and the lime green means it's just so beautiful. But they don't feed us that way at all. And then it's not just nectar the butterflies feed on. There are lots of butterfly foods, including rotting fruit, with this red spotted purple. You don't see these here, right? You see white admirals. And you go farther south, a little farther south, mid-Atlantic, New York, Appalachian, or Adirondacks, you start seeing hybrids between the white admirals and the red spotted purples. You get to Virginia, and it's all red spotted purples. They're considered the same species, but big hybrids looking at them. But the red spotted purple in the south got that way to mimic the toxic pipeline swallowtail with its blue and its red spots, and all are female swallowtails. Anyway, it's feeding here on a rotting pear along with a fly. And they feed on a lot of rotting fruit. They feed on the spilled or dropped honeydew from aphids. They'll feed on the ullage behind a winery. Any source of sweet starches they'll go to, but not just sweets. They also go to earth, gravel, mud, particularly for salts, inorganics, and only males. Very, very seldom just won't see a female there. Because when they mate, the male passes this spermatophore to the female. I have a poem about it, but I will not read it here tonight for several reasons. One is time, and the other one is it's But when they pass the spermatophore, they also pass a nutrient reward to the female that enables them to develop more eggs, bigger eggs, better eggs, and live long. But when a male shoots his nutrient reward wad, he's got to rebuild it, the electrolytes and so on. And he does that by sipping mud, so, particularly if something has urinated there, a horse or any animal. And lepidopters have discovered that trick. Make that happen. That's a laugh. Walk up a trail, take a pee, come back, butterflies are gone. But it's males, and you'll see these great aggregations of blues and swallowtails and skippers and things there. But another food source are the organics, the amino acid bearing, protein bearing things. Not proteins so much, but amino acids. And they get that from carrion, when a lot of butterflies hit dead things in the road. And also, scat. This is a fresh bear scat in the Cascades with common Butler's alpines and Cascade checker spot. Having a real good time. They're having a big time with the bear scat. Both males and females do that, and it enables them to live longer, live better, and thrive. But there's one really amazing group that actually lives on pollen. Actually, two groups, one moth group and one butterfly group. The moth group is represented here by this moth. It's about life size on the screen. They're really, really big. That's a lie. By dozens of orders of magnitude. They're much smaller than an eyelash hairs. They're really just a couple of millimeters. 2 or 3 millimeters in wingspan, maybe 4 or 5 at most. They are tiny. They're not microscopic, you can see it. But you see these amazing colors and fringe and everything. And you need some magnification. They're called the Micropterigidae. That's a family. They're in a superfamily of the moths. Butterflies are just moths, but fancy moths that fly by day. There's a lot of subfamilies of families and subfamilies of moths, and one group of them is the butterflies. And there are far fewer butterflies in the world than moths, both diversity and abundance. Right, because butterflies exploit the day and there are a lot more predators. Moths exploit the night when there are fewer. That's one reason they can be predators. But the one group of moths that's so amazing is this one, the Micropterigids, who have no tubular proboscis. Instead, they have chewing mouthparts, mandibles, with which they actually chew and eat pollen grains. They're the only Lepidoptera that do in that fashion. They are evolutionarily between, one could say, reproductively, the caddisflies and the Lepidoptera. They have traits of both the caddisflies and the Lepidoptera. And the common ancestor of both is really what they're all descended from, which will have had these traits. But it's the last group of Lepidoptera that retained chewing mouthparts. So that's, but there's one other group of butterflies that eat pollen, and they are, of course, extraordinarily important pollinators in the tropics. And by the way, those micropterygids, as tiny as they are, they're really important pollinators of a number of species of sedges and orchids and things. So here's the classic one. How many of you have been to the butterfly houses or butterfly conservatories? Yeah, sure. I don't know if there are any in New England, I can't remember. They're big in the American Museum. Pardon? Is it anyway, yes. So people go there to see tropical butterflies, cheap and easy. And they're wonderful. The only thing about them that bothers me a little bit is yesterday when I walked the meadow, there weren't a lot of butterflies out. It was hot, the heat of the day, and there was also not a lot blooming right now. There will be more after the 94-page pollinator plan that the Xerxes person, Julia, developed for you. I'll get a lot more nectar. But I did see one butterfly out there nectaring on, well, it wasn't a jolai weed, something like that. And there was a summer azure. You know, the spring azures, the little tiny lilac blue butterflies that fly about the time of the pussy and really, really early, and they fly on into May. Robert Frost wrote one of his most beloved poems about them called Blue Butterfly Day. Two of the lines go, with these skyflakes down in flurry on flurry, butterflies show more color on the wing than the flowers will ever do, unless they bloom. That's the spring azure. There's a summer species too. Patches later, and you're much paler, almost white. We saw that at your house, and it was out there at the nature center. So if a kid is going to really dig it out there, he or she or they are going to be attentive to little things, not just giant morpho butterflies in the butterfly house. And that's what I kind of worry about. They go to a butterfly house and see the most fabulous butterflies in the world. The biggest Lepidoptera in the world and the giant birdwing butterflies are available to see in the American Museum of Natural History butterfly house. And that's cool. But let's not let that occlude them to the wonders of the little things. So these are very common in the butterfly houses. The long-winged butterflies are called pelargonians. And here's what they do. They visit flowers in trap lines. They learn where the flowers are and they trap line them. It's like a fur trap. They go here to here to here to here. And researchers have learned that they're able to move the flowers, move the trap lines, and the butterflies very quickly adjust. They learn. They're very intelligent. They're considered some of the most highly evolved butterflies. And believe it or not, they're extremely closely related to the fritillaries, the silver spots. You all have great spangled fritillaries in your gardens right now. It's the most common butterfly that I've seen in Vermont. Big orange, black spots, silver spots underneath. Silver. And they feed on violets as caterpillars, but they're very, very closely related to these long-winged butterflies that all feed on passion flowers as caterpillars. And there's one butterfly that lives between them, semi-tropical, called the variegated fritillary. They migrate up here sometimes, and they're long wings, but they feed on violets. So a perfect evolutionary link between them. Anyway, what these do is they go to these trap lines and they nectar, yes, but they also gather pollen, and look how they do it. They stuff it like a bee in its pollen basket. They stuff it around the proboscis. Larry Gilbert, the great researcher on these, at the University of Texas, and in Costa Rica, christened this phenomenon the pollen donut. Works nicely with oozy patches and bogus doodads. So you see, scientific language is not so awkward. And that's what they do. So what do they do with it then? They don't have any manuals. What they do is really cool. Sometimes on dry earth that has some salts, butterflies will spit on it, really proboscis, from their crop, and then that will dissolve the salts, and then they'll suck it back up again. Well, that to get the salts. That's what these guys, these butterflies do. They exude fluid from the crop, probably, I would guess, also some pre-digestive enzymes from the gut. And it begins to dissolve the pollen and liquefy it, and they suck it back up. Ain't nature cool? Ain't evolution great? So, what does that do for them? The nectar doesn't do it for them. It's one word. What's nectar? Sugar. It's energy. That's right. It's your daily sugar high. It's your energy. So monarchs nectar for their fuel on the way. And also build up your fat with the nectar to get them quick. But what is pollen? One word. Pardon? Shout it out. You all know it. Protein. Exactly. It's a pure bit of protein. 100% protein. Oh, about 100%. But it's protein. And protein does something different for you metabolically. And this enables these butterflies to live for not 2 weeks, 3 weeks, to live for 3 and 4 months. And not to lay only the eggs they were born with out of the pupa, but to undergo oogenesis and spermogenesis to create new gametes as adults, which I don't think any other lepidopter do. And to lay a whole lot more eggs and more viable eggs. And that's what the longwings do. I'm never going to get to the most dramatic, the lepidopter pollinators, in case this wasn't cool enough for you. You listen to all this stuff, you remember you'll be able to hang out with jewel case. Did you put this in your hands? Most of you know, this ain't no bee. I know bees, and this ain't no bee.
Is it a bee?
I beg your pardon?
Well, there are those honeybees or.
Oh, you're just eliding your phrase a little bit. You're close. Keep going. Humming what? Humming what? Hummingbird.
Hummingbird.
Or bee moth, the bumblebee moth.
Yeah.
There's 2 different names for it. Hummingbird moth or bumblebee moth. And it's in a family called, anybody know in English? Hawk moths, mostly in England, right, because of their shape and their flight. And in the US and Canada, they're mostly known as, well, the scientific family is called the Sphingidae, S-P-H, Sphingidae, named for the Sphinx. They're called Sphinx moths, or hawk moths, or hummingbird moths. Because they're co-evolved with, of course, with their nectar sources, but they're convergent with hummingbirds. Convergent evolution is one of the coolest things of all. It's when 2 things do the same thing and develop a similar form. It's function following form. So have you ever watched an otter and a newt in the same pond at the same time? I have. And they look just about the same, and Aristotle thought they were. Aristotle thought newts and otters were closely related. Oh, you know, it makes sense. It's all typological. We still make equally mistaken conclusions. I was so shocked on the butterfly Christmas bird count a couple of years in the count when they went through the hawks and they didn't do the falcons, and I saw the only merlin on the count. I said, wait, where's the falcons? He said, oh, they're later. I said, wait, why aren't they with the hawks? They're not hawks anymore. You probably mostly know that. Falcons are not hawks. They are convergently evolved toward the hawk type from a whole different group of birds. This sort of stuff that we're learning all the time now with DNA. So it's not so far from Aristotle. You know, we thought the same thing, hawks and dropping, same deal. We thought that about newts and otters, but what happens very often in nature, you take your water lilies and how do they suspend their fertilize seeds in the water in a mucus that then hardens in the water. Who else does that? Well, only every frog and salamander and moth, and that's a whole lot. Convergent evolution between amphibian animals and water-loving plants. So the case here is that hummingbird moths are convergently evolved hummingbirds. Doesn't mean no relationship. It's analogous instead of homologous. They do the same thing. And they're also, by the way, superb bee mimics. So birds don't either. At least the clear-winged hummingbird moths are. Not all sphinx moths are. A lot of sphinx moths are, and these, by the way, are so friendly in the garden. It's just a delightful garden animal to have. They fly by day, too, mostly. Somewhat crepuscular. Most of the sphinx moths are crepuscular, flying at dusk. So you go out looking at lilacs in the spring, and you'll see the white line sphinxes on them. But this is a relative of the tobacco hornworm. Not sure which species of sphinx, but here it is nectaring on a night flower. And the hummingbirds, speaking of sphinx moths, like the bats, are particularly co-evolved with the night blooming flowers that are white, almost always white, or pale yellow, or pale blue. Because they reflect the ultraviolet. And the ultraviolet is what draws these things in like a headline. Like landing strips at an airport. In fact, you know, when nectars land on flowers, you know, the little spots along the flowers, petals, as on phlox and things, you have little spots running down toward the corolla. They are ultravioletly reflecting. And it is exactly like landing lights in an airport.
I just found out that the mosquito hornworms can be seen under a black light.
That's right. Yeah, a lot of moth people go out and moth people use black lights to attract moths around, but they also use them in black headlights to see the moths in that because a lot of them fluoresce. This is a lot of fun. So here's one poking its, and as you see, sphinx moths have particularly long muscles. That one's just getting going. It hasn't gone very far down there. But you see in the insect, when you screen again, the insect isn't on there. Oh, it's the next slide. That's why. Dope. Oh, there. This is the most famous story of all. Darwin figured this out. It's a moth in Madagascar. This thing's moth. And here it is visiting an orchid called Angraecum sesquipedale. Sesquipedale is a pun that somebody bought this flag gave it, because it means that nectar tube is a foot and a half long. The next picture will show that. We're just seeing the beginning of the nectar tube here. But the moth can have a proboscis from 12 to 16 inches long. And the moth had not been found in Darwin's time, just the orchid. So Darwin predicted its occurrence. And Bishop Wilberforce, who was a good man, he's an abolitionist and so on, he's a social progressive, but he wasn't a very good biologist. So when he debated Huxley who debated on Darwin's behalf at the Oxford Union, he said, well, what would Mr. Darwin say about, this orchid in Madagascar? Clearly there's nothing that's, they used the word co-adapted, by the way, or co-evolved, Darwin did. There's clearly nothing co-evolved in this orchid. And Darwin said, yes, there will be. It's going to be found. And it was found. And of course it was named Sphinx predator. Its name has been changed now because it's now considered a subspecies of an African mainland species named Xanthopan morgani. And so now it's called Xanthopan morgani predicting, but it's still predicting. And here we have a beautiful 19th century rendering of the orchid with this long nectar tubes and the moths coming in with the red on my buses. I was lucky enough to study evolution with Charles Remington, the founder of the Lepidoptera Society, which I joined at the age of 12, which he founded in the year I was founded in 1947. I joined it at 12. And I studied with him at Yale. I got to hear his evolution class. And in the greenhouses at Yale, behind Osborne Laboratory, he always had Angraecum sesquipedale orchids. And they always bloomed just in time for his lecture. He didn't have them all. So are lepidoptera really good pollinators? Well, clearly they are. In that case, absolutely essential. Without that moth, that plant dies. Okay? That's called obligate. It's not elective, which biologists call faculty. You can do with it or without it. No, it's obligate. Has to happen. But in many cases, butterflies are more generous. And you saw in the literature, really more during the 80s and 90s, people saying, well, really butterflies aren't very good pollinators. You read that a lot. But there's been recent research showing that they're really much better than people thought. This swallowtail, it's a female spice bush swallowtail, I think. And you can barely see the forewings because they're fluttering. And you see swallowtails do that a lot with their nectar. Here's a eastern tiger swallowtail doing the same thing on a native azalea in the Smokies. It's not fluttering right now, but they flutter around. And then here's your friend, your own garden buddy. Whoa, close your eyes, please. I mean it. Close your eyes. Let's see this yet. Please. Hold on. Oh, I mean it. Close your eyes. There we go. Sensitive. Yeah, that's a great spectacular, and it's depending on this area. And what's been found in recent research is that fiddlers and swallowtails do a lot of this in their nectar, and they're showering the female parts with pollen when they do so. So it's not like specialized in plunking it in there, like the bees that are co-adapted with bee orchids. The orchids not only look like the bees and mimic female bees, so the males come and try to mate with the orchid and pollinate them at that time. And the pollen is born in pollinia that come off of the orchid like a capsule on the International Space Station and dock in special receptacles on the leg of the bee and are carried to the next receptacle. Now that's specialization. Butterflies are like that. They shower with pollen. So they are good after all. Now while we're on fiddlers, we're going to transition, coming down to the end now, about the future of pollinators and what we need to do for them and their plight. Having established, I hope that they're kind of important. And note that I haven't said a word about crops, barely. I said almonds, I said blueberries. But a lot of pollinator talks concentrate specifically on the ecological service they perform for humans, which is extremely important. But you know what? From that, I want to do it for their own sake too. So yeah, they're very important for crops and flowers and things, but they're important for the structure and the integrity of the system. Right? And the system was having some troubles. Here we have the biggest fiddler in the country called anybody know? The regal fritillary. Used to occur in New England, last in Massachusetts, and then I think they're gone even from Pennsylvania now. There's one or two populations. They're extinct essentially in the east, and they're only in the tall grass prairie of the Midwest. Some places still common, but not very many. And male and female, male on the left, female on the right, not only nectaring on pink purple coneflower, was one of the best nectar plants ever made, but also they're mating at the same time, double duty. It's called when you do two things at once. Multitasking. Multitasking. So they need the nectar press, doesn't have to be coneflower. That's what the prairie plants would do. But they have to have, for the caterpillar, they've got to have violets. All fritillaries feed on violets as caterpillars. If you got violets, you very well may have fritillaries. If you have fritillaries, you know there are violets. There are going to be a lot of violets around here because I've seen hundreds and hundreds of great spangled fritillaries in the last 2 years. But the ones that the eagle feeds on primarily are bird's foot violets. This is very good for prairie species. So your ideal situation is a nice, diverse, tall grass prairie with cornflowers on top and bird's foot violets below. And you know, the prairies, there's so little left, but the ones that are left generally need to be managed because they grow up in shrubs. You know, the serial stages change with succession. And the management these days is usually done with fire. Fire management has become extremely popular in the prairies. And the people who do it really, really like to do it. Burn bosses, and they get Native Americans involved doing rituals and songs and dances when they start a fire, and they go at it. Problem is they've been a little too enthusiastic without knowing the baseline, and they've done enormous damage. Conservationists have, without knowing what they were doing. Yes, it's a very effective means of suspending or setting back the succession and arresting the late zero stages and keeping the prairie. The problem is, even though with these gorgeous flower gardens, when flowers are there, well, year after year they diminish in diversity under a fire regime. If fires have been too hot, too frequent, too long, too deep, too big. Problem is with that flower garden, you got no bugs. In case they have burned the immature stages of the pollinating insects, and they have burned the soil fine. And that doesn't come back for very long time. And we don't even have baseline on most of these things. We have a prioritized relatively well in a lot of places. Not as much with moths, very much less for Hymenoptera, and almost none for the Orthoptera that we've had others. So we don't even know what we're doing. And we end up with these flower gardens created by what we affectionately call the pyrobotanists. They're sweet people doing what they know to do to keep the flowers going. And we have been among them. But certain courageous lepidopterists bucking the tide started doing some iconoclastic papers. We wanted to talk about shooting the messengers. They were not well received for some time in the ecological literature and community. So they were bringing the bad word. They never want to hear the bad word. But what we were finding was that the pollinators were gone. So you remember in my poem I talked about the fringe prairie orchid and the hawk moth bringing the sperms to it. The pollen, of course, being sperms and vines. Do you know how it's done now on most preserves? With toothpicks. Flower by flower. Because the hawk moth, it's co-evolved with the fringe prairie orchid just as much as an Angraecum sesquipedale with Xanthopan burgundy predicta in Madagascar was extinct. Not as a species, thank God, but on many of the reserves. And that shows what we come to. So it's pretty clear now. Those people, by the way, those lepidopterists, those iconoclasts, now they're being lionized and embraced. Botanists are coming around and they're saying, oh yeah, guess we burned too much, too fast, too long, too deep, too hot. And it's becoming much more a case of mosaic management with some grazing, some very selective herbicide use when necessary, and yes, grazing can be very effective for the great spangled fritillary in Missouri. Some of the best sites are raised in very, very old cattle allotments that, it's moist there, so it can take it with restraint. And so with the mosaic of management, you can accomplish the ends of both the plants and insects, but it can be hard to put them back. And the problem is, you do not have the reservoirs of recolonization. When you had a big prairie here, big prairie here, big prairie here, and the buffalo trampled, the bison trampled 50,000 acres, and eradicated practically everything. And then a giant fire came and did another 100,000 acres. It didn't so much matter because in 10 years, they would have been filling in again because there was all the rest of the work. And now you get concept early in Kansas and in this area by Madison and this area there. And they don't have any reservoirs of recolonization nearby. That's the problem. And so in the state of Iowa, this butterfly and 2 other rare skippers were eradicated on a statewide basis by the DNRs and the Nature Conservancy and similar bodies. Now they're trying to be brought back. I get involved in some introductions in Washington for the same thing happening on some bird reserves. That's the Dakota skip, or one of the woodland native lily in the area. You know, they still occur in a few places, and we very much hope they'll be back elsewhere too. But we finally come down to the case of actual extinction, and that brings us to the aforementioned Xerces blue. You can say Xerces, you can say Xerxes. It's named for Xerxes just because the old lepidopterists had classical educations, knew their mythology and their history, knew almost nothing about the thousands of species of organisms they were naming. So they just pulled names out of a hat. The Fritillaries are named for Greek goddesses. The dusky wings are named for Greek poets. You know, no reason. And so Xerxes was named for Xerxes, but he was a Frenchman, so we call it Xerces, which has given us no end of headaches. But I was studying on a Lucky Fulbright in England in 1971, butterfly conservation in a particular laboratory where it was the only place in the world much was being done in research on that. The only place to study it, and I locked into doing it there, and halfway through my year, having learned so much, I said, what am I going to do with it? We didn't have any mechanism. And so it occurred to me, coming home from a lecture on the English large blue butterfly that was almost extinct, though they'd been trying to save it for 50 years. They didn't know how, because it had this crazy co-evolved mensalism or mutualism, symbiosis, with ants, lots of blues, hair streaks and color, milked by ants for their honeydew, just like aphids. Again, convergent evolution. And the ants protect the larvae. But in the case of these European blues, the caterpillars drop on the ground and are taken into the ant nest by the ants, where they become carnivorous on the ant brood, which the ants tolerate in exchange for the honeydew. They hatch underground, emit don't kill me fake pheromones, crawl out again, and fly away. Well, when you've got a system like that, it's easy to screw it up. And it did get screwed up, and they didn't know how. By the time they figured it out, it's too late. Large blue became extinct in England. But they said, if we lose the large blue, let's make it an example so we don't lose any more. On the way home that night back to my lab from London, I was thinking, I said, oh man, we've already lost the blue, the Xerces blue. It became extinct in San Francisco in 1943. And it was a very distinctive blue. Showed a lot of promise even for early genetic studies, even in the 40s, because its spotting was variable and predictable by brood, and it was very cool. Males on the left there, females on the right. Old specimens from the California Academy of Science. Well, where it became extinct was a place you might know in San Francisco called the Presidio. 2 views of it there, looking toward the Golden Gate Bridge and then down below it. Presidio was the habitat like in the picture below, but then it was all modified in the 40s, building up for the rural line, and the habitat was destroyed or replaced, and the butterfly became extinct. The last one known was at Presidio in 43. And so I said, my gosh, we've already lost this blue. Let's have the Xerces Society to try to bring butterflies and birds back. And that's why Julia presented her 94-page plan to you yesterday. So it's been happening for 53 years now. Makes me happy, but a lot of other people are getting into butterfly conservation now too. But that was the first effort because we didn't have a mechanism like this to do it. So that's a nice story, but it occurred to me a number of years ago, 20 years ago, that we lost the Xerces brood. But the English then, having lost the large brood, they finally figured out how to manage for the ant to get the right species of ant, because they had the wrong species of ant taken over, and it would take the caterpillar and eat it. So now they figured out what to do to get the right ant back. They went to Sweden, 10 or 15,000 years removed from England evolutionarily, brought the Swedish forest blues back, the nearest related species, and introduced it to England. And now it's doing wonders. It's eating the ants out across the world. And it's, we presume, micro-evolving back toward the English forest. So extinction might not be always forever. So 20 years ago, I thought, you know, we can do that with the Xerces blue. Yeah, it's extinct, but it's got a common ancestor with the silvery leaf, which does occur in New England, but in several subspecies on the California coast, one of which will have been the nearest genetic relative to Xerces with a common ancestor. And I said, if we can discern which one that is, we could plunk it back into the Presidio. The reason I thought that is, Presidio had already become public land again for the arts, for Native Americans activities, for all kinds of cool stuff. But a lot of it they restored as in the lower picture as habitat, the right habitat, with Xerces bushplanting. So I said, why don't we do that? And now, 15 years later, 5 years ago, they read my paper. I published it in several places. It was called Resurrection Ecology, Bring Back the Xerces Blue. And people said it was nuts and so on, but 5 years ago, I got a call and they were having a great big meeting in the Presidio. And the good folks interested in conservation and said, we're going to try it. And they'd already put back 2 butterflies that became extinct that were easier to do, closer, the species were extinct. So they wanted to do it. Now the genomics are evolved to the point where they could cheaply and easily find out which subspecies really was the most closely related. It was numerous enough to get permits to get it, bring it in, and this May they did it. And the next day, there was a plinth right, the base of a statue that happened to be vacant, formerly occupied by a Confederate general. The next day, this being San Francisco, a gorilla, G-U-E-R-I-L-L-A, Xerces blue statue appeared on that one. You don't hang out with the dude with the holster on his belt without thinking of Chekhov, right, and the gun on the mantle. And the play ain't gonna be over till the gun comes down. So in my holster is a harmonica. Will you indulge me? Yeah. This I did as a pep song for the Xerces Society about 30 years ago. It ain't any good, but you know, don't listen too closely, Will. Your positions. It's called the Xerces Blue Blues. In Chi, the people's key. Hi, Colonel. You want to hold that applause for sure. I got the Xerces Blue Blues. Probably a totally different key, so I should know. Them Xerces Blues is extinct. I got the, that's too hot. I got the Xerces Blue Blues. Them Xerces Blues is extinct. I got the Xerces Blues, mama. Them Xerces Blues is all extinct. When San Francisco expanded, them blues got washed down the same. I got the butterfly blues now. Butterflies is all gone. I got the butterfly blues, daddy. Them butterflies is about all gone. The folks just happily sprays them. Can't have no bugs in there at all. I got the pesticide blues now. Bulldozer blues too. I got the bulldozer blues now. Pesticide blues too. 'cause them mean old bulldozers short on the job on them poor little Circe. Sing it with me. Blues. I do that really often for very good reason. So we're dropping on down now. I'm talking about a butterfly from my territory, the Oregon silver spot, which is restored on its Oregon habitat because of everybody doing the things I'm talking about. It's coming back because the violets have been restored. The native nectar plants were all gone because of Tennessee breadwort. But the Tennessee breadwort gave enough nectar for it to get through. Because it's not all native plants that they use. I'm sorry to say to the native plants folks, of which I'm one, but it's often the non-native plants that see them through until the native plants come back. So the Tennessee breadwort was knocked out with the cinnabar moth, whose caterpillars are called by the kids the Tennessee tigers. And then the native nectar plants came back. And the butterflies back now on Cascade Head and Orchid. So happy stories abound. But don't think that you can use only native plants to restore butterflies. And that if you get rid of the invasives, you will necessarily, in a given situation, be doing a good thing. Because, as I say, without the Tennessee breadwort, those will be gone from there. Dandelions are superb spring nectar plants for many things. Honeybees, of course, in general. Some don't do anything like training buttercups. Nothing catches on them at all. You really want the native plants and the native habitats. And there is the biggest butterfly in the West on the balsam root. Oh, it was there. 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 But it just as happily nectars on knotweed and other species of knotweed, the worst weeds in the West, the weed that ate Montana. And there was a giant, photograph like here on knotweed by the road. That butterfly is vastly more common than it was in pre-contact times, both because of that and the fact that its caterpillar, the little green snake, feeds on green ash, as well as its native cherries. And green ash has been planted as a shade tree in every town from Winnipeg to Mexico City, and it's all over that entire range. On the other hand, some like this swallowtail little snake feeds solely on pawpaw only, and its butterfly, the zebra swallowtail, therefore depends on pawpaw. So you gotta find out what you got, what's using it before you get rid of it. And realize a lot of good old garden plants, lilacs, phloxes. This coastal swallowtail is not angelica, native, but it will just as happily feed on dill and carrot in your backyard, and it makes no distinction. The Anna swallowtail of the West. But this English swallowtail, the only one in England called the swallowtail, feeds only on a certain oleifera's plant in the fens of northeastern England, East Anglia, which aren't being cut for thatch nearly as much anymore. And the plants almost done, and the butterflies almost done. So figure out what's a specialist, what's not. And even butterfly bush, which is out on the States now, is an invasive. Nothing attracts butterflies like butterfly bush, I'm sorry to say, but that's true. And here are common species, but utterly gorgeous species in England, all over the butterfly. So you can use some unpopular plants if you can get away with it, but transition into natives where the natives work. Don't get rid of the nectar sources until you have a replacement. And even some of the most vilified plants, we should never vilify organism. It's not their fault. We put in there, such as purple loosestrife. Really big problem in the wetlands, right? A major nectar source for migratory monarchs in eastern Washington. Of course, we're not linking with them. And in western migratory monarchs, what do they overwinter in? Not the native fir trees of Mexico. No, they overwinter in eucalyptus. Eucalyptus rolled on from California, so would be the monarchs. So keep those subtleties in mind as we do this. And this is what we aim for. Native plants thriving in the landscape. Many tools now for it. Many of them provided by Xerxes. Let's do it, and let's remember this. And it's the only side and the only word I'll say about it. I won't even say it. Neonics, the pesticides, are the worst single thing. Worse than habitat development, worse than climate change on the insects right now, and the bats and bugs. What climate change too, of course, and that's happening, and things get hotter and drier. It's not good for anybody, including the cows. And the butterflies are shifting because being more southern species. But there will be additions as well as losses. The rainbow skipper is turning up in Texas, might make it farther north. We're not going to have pink spotted swallowtails on pink bougainvillea in in the middle of Westminster West for a while. What we are getting buckeye butterflies farther and farther north every year. And so by attending to all of this, we might be able to preserve a world in which we say not only our rich natural heritage of butterflies, but all the other pollinators, and that the children and others will have them in their lives, on their houses and elsewhere. They're there, they're hanging out, they're just waiting for us to do the right thing and to protect the pollinators. Because if we make their world right for them, they will make our world not only productive, but beautiful for us. Thank you very much. Thank you so much. I know I've nothing else you wanted to do tonight, like watch TV.
So
Do we have time for a couple of questions?
it's 8:45.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, so what I'm going to say is thank you to each and every one of you. Bob is going to stay a while longer. We'll go downstairs. So any of you who would like to join us downstairs, do so. But most of all, we can continue to make a positive difference. This is an informative and also hopeful message that we heard from Bob. We have great opportunities in Vermont, and we can also inspire others. So thank you for what you're doing in your own home environment, each of you, Emily, and who's have a good night. Thank you.
My congratulations to all of you.